So let's take a look at some scary army lists for the Astartes right now, with one of the best examples I could find for each core codex chapter. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking army lists of the Space Marines, with a few examples of the choices that good players have made have proven themselves in the fires of tournament battles against the enemy. Space Marines in Warhammer 40k are having a fairly good time of it right now. Their win rates are fairly well balanced, around 48% for the average player attending a grand tournament currently. That's maybe a bit middle of the pack on that metric, though they certainly seem to be an army that's well capable of performing at the absolute top levels of the game, having a disproportionate amount of grand tournament wins and top table placings, which is kind of encouraging for the army. It is always nice to know that if you have an optimised list and you play it well, then you can absolutely tangle with the best things that 40k has to throw at you. It's quite nice to see Space Marine builds getting a little bit more interesting as well. It had been Ultramarines all the way for a slightly depressingly long time. With the recent content for the other chapters though, with special characters and attachments, a fair few people have been tempted away. In particular, certain builds of the Guard Shadowmark Talon are doing rather well. Perhaps the single strongest performer for the Astartes on paper, with win rates in the high 50s. Though otherwise certain Ultramarine lists are still doing really well, particularly with Stormlance and Gladius Task Force. And there's a fair bit of success for Ironstorm, Firestorm, and some of the chapter-specific options as well, such as Forgefather Seekers for the Salamanders, and some early success for Spearpoint Brotherhood for the White Scars. For this one I thought we'd mainly take a look at 6 lists that have done well recently for the Astartes, one each for each of the major codex chapters. Most of them have at least one pretty good example that have done well recently, Iron Hands being the main one that has struggled to find examples so much. Let's talk through those lists, see what has been played, and focus on a few of the units. For this one I thought we'd focus on the units that really make the list different as opposed to Space Marine staples. As ever, if you were looking to add anything to your army, check out the affiliate discount retailers linked in the video description. They can save a fair bit of money on Warhammer 40k purchases. There's several examples around the world, and anything bought after them helps to support Auspex Tactics and keep these videos coming. A big thank you to anyone using those. First up, let's start with the Salamanders, and the example for them is a Firestorm Assault Force. They do have the option of either this or the Forgefather Seekers, both of which do have good stuff, and I probably prefer the Forgefathers one very slightly myself. But you do have a few trade-outs for taking that over the Firestorm, including a few transport stratagems and one quite nice enhancement. Firestorm's quite nice for supporting Space Marine close-range shooting, which the Salamanders tend to get on rather well with, giving ranged weapons the assault keywords and a +1 strength when you're within 12 inches. Have some nice damage dealer stratagems, including a +1 to wound when you're nearby the opponent. There's the potential for devastating wound torrent shots, and a few transport shenanigans, including being able to get out and shoot the enemy that shot you. They have good enhancements as well, including an ignores modifiers and an ability to flip dice to a 6. One player who managed to take the Salamanders Firestorm force undefeated was Michele Forgione, using it to play second at a tournament called Hallowar, and going 5 games undefeated with the Sons of Vulcan. Games Workshop have done rather well to make the Salamanders synergise with their themed attachment, perhaps the big and fairly game-changing one being Vulcan Estarn, who allows you to mark a unit to get reroll wound rolls against with Melter and Torrent weapons, and they're the exact weapons that already get a fair bit out of the detachment rule with the advance and shoot and the +1 strength in close. It looks like he's going to be joining a squad of company heroes. This one is going very heavy on the transport units. There's a Land Raider Redeemer, which will absolutely love the rerolls of Vulcan, and then there's an Armoured Spearhead with 2 impulses with a Sky Talon array, plus 2 Razorbacks with las cannons. The Razorbacks have squads of multi-melter Devastators in, so some very heavy hitting close range firepower there. The Razorbacks marking targets for reroll wound rolls from those multi-melters. Then there's a big squad of Bladeguard veterans. They're going to be joined by Adrax Agatone and a Lieutenant with Storm Shield and Champion of Humanity. And that's going to make a colossally fighty unit, and looks like that one will be going in the Land Raider Redeemer to deliver them safely into close combat. That unit's just going to have a lot of stat damage, plus will ignore modifiers with Champion of Humanity. And then finally, to fill out the transports, there's 2 Inferno squads. I guess they could both ride in the Impulsors, though if you wanted you could have Vulcan squad in an Impulsor, and have some Infernus Marines join the big squad in the Land Raider Redeemer. Infernus Marines just get to a big breakpoint in efficiency if they're all strength 6 and can actually get to their targets with the advance and shoot, with Vulcan's full wound rerolls with them, and they're going to put a lot of damage on most things. Then, interestingly, there's 2 units of Vanguard veterans with Inferno pistols here. It seems that they're getting the nod over the Jump Intercessors here, and I feel like Inferno pistols are the slightly less common way to play them. It certainly seems like it'll make a lot of sense in Firestorm though. They'll be able to get to their targets and have better hitting power when they get there. They also could benefit from Vulcan's rerolls. And then finally, for objective support, there's 1 unit of Intercessors for sticky objectives, some scouts to screen the midboard, and then the often present Lieutenant with combi weapon. He takes Forged in battle for the -1 damage, so is extra hard to take down even compared with normal. Certainly quite a lot of big damage punches in that one. The transport should deliver those big units to strike the enemy first rather than the other way around. and they've got plenty of good targets for those stratagems with a lot of close range infantry and transports. Taking a look at a few of the datasheets, if playing Salamanders, it's likely that both Vulcan Hestan and Adrax Agaton are going to make an appearance. Vulcan's a fairly fighty character with the big damage rerolls we mentioned, and company heroes feel like a pretty great place for him. They can help keep him safe while he scraps for the midboard. If he gets on one nominated objective, he goes up to OC 10, so you've likely got that for a turn until the opponent can bring him and his squad low. Adrax Agaton synergizes with Bladeguard really well. He gets a bunch of strength 10 and damage 3 attacks, and gives his squad rerolling wound rolls, which is one of the biggest things for the Bladeguard with their slightly lower strength of 5, with that lieutenant with the lethal hits in the units, and also the potential for Oath of Moment if you want it. That should be a squad that can just about wreck most things in the game. It's cool to see Devastators getting used. The multi-melters and the Razorbacks do work rather well with Firestorm, being able to get close within that range and going up to strength 10 when they get there. They can quite easily get strength 10, have loads of damage against tanks, and get reroll wounds either from Vulcan or the Razorbacks themselves. And then finally the Land Raider Redeemer is a sturdy workhorse of a bunch of Space Marine lists, a big armoured bulkhead that the majority of armies can't really deal with without massive amounts of effort, has huge overwatch threat if the opponents try to move up to the midboard and onto an objective it can see, and again it's a great choice for Vulcan rerolls, which can affect those horrendous Flamestorm cannons and also the multi-melter. Before we move on to the other chapters, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in the Magnet Baron. They supply all things neodymium for use in Warhammer 40k hobby projects, based in the USA, though they can ship worldwide. I'm certainly quite a big user of magnets in my own miniatures, in particular for vehicles and character miniatures where you might want to swap out one loadout for another. So my magnetised Leman Russes and Imperial Knights have been some of my most played models as a result over the editions. The Magnet Baron's supplies have a whole bunch of kits that are aimed at various different Warhammer 40k ones, several of them slightly more basic ones where you have the right magnets for one size, and the other ones being really quite in-depth ones with a bunch of 3D printed components, and some step-by-step instruction guides to how you go about using them on miniatures you're assembling. They've got plenty of other stuff besides as well, flight stand bundles, magnets to go under the bottoms of bases, and some starter kits to help you get going with this side of the hobby. Check them out, links down in the video description if you'd like to, and a big thank you to them for sponsoring this one. Next up we've got the White Scars, and someone managed to do well with their new Spearpoint task force. This one's their sort of White Scar specific Stormlance task force, the one that helps to support melee units and bikes, but does just help out really quite a lot with close combat armies and 40k in general. You can charge after advancing and charge after falling back. Suboden Khan can get an extra move at the end of the fight phase for free. In Spearpoint there's a more generic melee boost with lance or lethal hits, a nice big automatic 6-inch reactive move for infantry or mounted units, and quite a good durability one for vehicles and mounted with a -1 to hit and wound at range. Stormlance is already a good detachment for marine melee things, and Spearpoint makes some improvements on it. The first person to win a grand tournament with this detachment has been Ruben Zhao, using this list to go 6-0 at a tournament called the Tracy Crusade, a 34-player grand tournament. The list is led, unsurprisingly, by Suboden Khan himself. He's going to be joining a squad of Outriders in a super fast-moving unit that can hit very hard from a very, very long way away here, and they can also make the best use of quite a lot of those stratagems as well. Then there's another couple of big melee threats. There's a unit of 3 Assault Centurions that look like they're going to be jumping out of a Land Raider Redeemer. I guess between the assault ramp and potentially advance and charge, depending on what makes sense, there's a lot more chance of them making melee in this detachment than elsewhere, and they could be a powerful unit for reactive moves as well. Then it looks like there's a regular captain on foot with Spearpoint Paragon, so that gives him some extra strength and AP on the charge, and he appears to be joining a squad of Assault Intercessors, giving a unit that can hit really quite hard on the midfield objectives, potentially getting 4 rerolls to wound, and pretty efficient for a fairly cheap fighter unit. Then to back all that up, there's a fairly serious amount of firepower. There's a big squad of 10 Hellblasters, and they're joined by a lieutenant for some lethal hits and fall back and shoot, and he also takes the Hunter's Eye enhancement. That's perhaps a surprisingly powerful range damage dealer one, giving you sustained hits 1 and ignores cover, so 2 fairly nasty buffs on an already very shooty unit, and they could be an excellent choice for using Oath of Moment on their targets. Rerolling all the hit rolls and a +1 to wound will go down very nicely on those mid-strength plasma profiles. Kind of unusually as well, this one looks like it's a really all-in combo. As well as the lieutenant, there's also an apothecary joining the unit. There's a better chance that he might have some marines to heal, given that they might damage themselves with their own plasma overheats. And again, they feel like a good unit to try and reactive move if they can ever keep safe, just due to how dangerous all that plasma fire is. Then for dealing with heavy armour, there's a pair of Repulsor Executioners, each with a heavy laser destroyer. So a good chance to punch some holes in tanks there, and they do have a vast amount of spammed small arm shots as well that can make a mess of some infantry. Then finally for actions and objectives, there's a whole load of Space Marine standard skirmish style things. There's a squad of Incursors that can mark a target for +1 to hit. Both the Hellblasters and the Repulsor Executioners will get some value out of that. There's a squad of Infiltrators to deny deep strike, some jump intercessors for skirming and objectives, a combi lieutenant, and a unit of 5 scouts for some cheap infiltrators. It is pretty cool to see the White Scars having enough to have people tempted to play them and top in tournaments. For units in this one, Suboden comes in pride of place. He basically makes the difference between an Outrider squad being a bit on the weak side to being able to tangle with tough stuff, a fairly hard-hitting lance attack on the charge with some anti-keywords, and when he's attached to an Outrider squad he'll also be +1 damage as well on the charge, so able to hit some tanks and vehicles or terminate as well. His unit will be able to strike out at a massive distance, as he lets his unit smash through terrain things, so he can potentially stage them fairly aggressively in the bottom of a ground floor ruin, and then have their 12-inch movement and advanced shoot and charge after that. Otherwise cool to see some Hellblasters here. It seems for the majority of Space Marine optimised lists, they don't tend to make the cut versus gun tanks, having quite good damage but being far easier to kill. It certainly seemed like one of the best things on paper for that Hunter's Eye enhancement though. Lethal hits, sustained hits and ignores cover just means that they're enormously general purpose, even more so than normal. Next up we have the Sneaky Raven Guard with perhaps one of the top threats of the Space Marine meta right now in the Shadowmark Talon. This one's their take on the Vanguard Spearhead detachment, their core rule giving you a -1 to hit and cover from greater than 12 inches away. And the Raven Guard version allows you to jump units back into reserve if you have Ethon Shan around and not have to pay the 1 command point tax that you'd normally have to do so. Otherwise they have some useful stratagems, a shooting damage buff, a reactive move either D6 inches or 6 inches, a fallback shoot and charge and precision in the fight phase, plus several of the enhancements are quite usable as well. There's one for increasing the cost of nearby stratagems, and a first turn reserves arrival with Hunter's Instincts that can work with rapid ingress and potentially get you some first turn charges depending on who goes first. One particular copy for a net list of this seems to have been having success at a few events, and then plenty of other players doing some minor variants of it. This one of course has Ethon Shan doing lone operative things and coordinating those return to reserves, and then Kavan Shrike with a big squad of Vanguard veterans, giving you a big threatening melee damage dealer unit that also can't be shot at long range. Then there's a second big squad of Vanguard veterans, and they're pretty guaranteed to get the first strike on the enemy early in the game. They go with a captain with jump pack, and then that captain has Hunter's Instincts, so you can rapid ingress turn 1, and then get the charge either on your turn 1 or your turn 2 depending on who went first. Then to make great use of return to reserve, there's 6 Devastator Centurions with the missiles and las cannons. Some of the single biggest damage output that the Space Marines have, they're usually hampered by not being able to move so fast, and there's also a smaller unit of 3 of the same. There's 6 Inceptors with Plasma and 2 sets of 3 with Assault Bolters. They'll be able to do secondary objectives rather well and also really enjoy the return to reserves, given their big value is being able to drop in closer when they need to. And finally for objective support there's a Combi Lieutenant, 5 Intercessors and 2 sets of 5 Jump Intercessors. As you can see this list was used to win the Crucible Grand Tournament by John Lennon here. And since then it does look like a lot of people have used similar lists. It seems that Brenton Rice used a very similar list here to go undefeated at Rumble on the Rivers. Really quite similar units here. It looks like the only major difference is taking more Inferno pistols on the Vanguard veterans rather than having a squad with shields. The Raven Guard lone operatives are rather god tier. Ethon Shan himself must be vying for one of the single most powerful characters in the game for his cheap points cost of 85. I was very surprised that he didn't cost more than this. Lone operatives are great for utility in the first place. He can move super fast at 14 inches, has genuinely quite good melee damage output with lots of twin linked attacks with sustained hits, allows a charge reroll per turn if you need it, and of course gets absolutely great in that detachment with the ability to hop things back into reserve when needed. Kavan Shrike's also thoroughly excellent for 100 points, a similar sort of stat line. He makes Jump Intercessors OC2, and then he makes his big Vanguard veteran squad unable to be shot outside of 12 inches, so you have a super powerful melee unit the opponent's going to struggle to deal with. Interesting to see Vanguard veterans used in quite such a big way in both of these, and some good variation both with Inferno pistols and the Storm Shields. Particularly with Hunter's Instincts and Shrike around, there is a pretty good chance they could be using those Inferno pistols before the opponent has the chance to strike back. And if you did go big investment with both at the moment, they've got a fairly good chance to wreck something in the shooting phase, never mind what they do in close combat. Hopefully Games Workshop isn't too long about getting some new models for them. Finally, the Devastator Centurions and Inceptors also do really well here with return to reserves. Devastator Centurions might be fairly pricey, but have an excellent amount of damage for their points cost, and they're usually just hampered by it being super slow and moving 4 inches. Here though, they're able to jump into strategic reserve and then get lines of sight around the board edges. And the other support in Shadowmark is really nice. A +1 to hit and extra AP is good, and gaining the fallback and shoot stratagem is quite a big deal for them, so you can't just tie them up with a chaff unit and stop them firing for a turn. The Shadowmark Talon's been having some good success with all sorts of variations on it though. Here's another fairly similar list that did well at the London Grand Tournament. Most of the same damage dealers but swapping around a bit of objective support. Here's another one that went 5-1 undefeated at the London Grand Tournament. Again similar damage dealers and swapping around some support units. People absolutely do go for different builds on it though. Here's another list that tops a different grand tournament, featuring an infiltrating squad of Judas here with Bladeguard, and then a pair of ballistas dreadnoughts rather than extra Centurions. Raven Guard do very much seem to be one of the Space Marine armies to fear right now. Next up for the Ultramarines, they can do well with a number of different detachments. Outside of the chapter themed ones, they seem like the chapter that makes best use of the standard Space Marine detachments more. And for one example of one of their strong lists, here's an Ironstorm Spearhead one, so the tank and dreadnought focus one. Armoured Wrath gives you some extra damage output with some extra rerolls whenever you attack. And then there's some good stratagems for supporting monsters and vehicles. Things like return fire, ignores modifiers, and some big sustained hits when you really need to turn the damage on. Plus some good enhancements for Tech Marines as well, cancelling failed saves, allowing you to fall back, shoot and charge, or granting out lethal hits. One Ultramarines Ironstorm list that won a grand tournament recently was this one by Zachary Morales, this one placing first at Rumble on the Rivers, also going 5-0 undefeated. Rabute Guilliman, as he often is at the centre of this one. He hands out free stratagems nearby and doubles up Oath of Moment, both of which work pretty great with Ironstorm, as you want those free stratagems on powerful vehicles, and then doubling up on Oath means that the vehicle should be hitting extra hard within a turn. He is supported by a pair of Tech Marines, one with the lethal hits and one with the fall back and shoot, and also a combi lieutenant for secondary objective skirmishing. They're supporting 6 mainline damage dealer vehicles, 2 Redemptor dreadnoughts with macroplasmas, really quite general purpose threats, very tough to kill and a lot more efficient after the points decrease. They're particularly valuable ones to repair with Tech Marines as well, as the -1 damage means their wounds are hard to take off in the first place. Interestingly enough, there's also a Brutalis dreadnought, so the melee variant marching up the board, perhaps has a bit of a distraction kind effects that you can't afford not to kill. 2 Vindicators, which are just fairly good heavy hitting firepower all around and not too easy to take down, and a Gladiator Reaper, which often seems to get a look in Ironstorm lists and can be an interesting one to use the sustained hit stratagem on if you just absolutely need to obliterate a horde unit. The Redemptors and the Vindicator are big chunky enough vehicles with enough points that they're well worth using the stratagems on. The Vindicators in particular will appreciate those single rerolls, and then while they're getting the damage done, there's plenty of units to do objective things, scouts, infiltrators, and jump intercessors. Ironstorm lists with a whole bunch of vehicles have got a good chance to outshoot anything that goes up against them, but still might not necessarily be the easiest to play at a competitive kind of level. You really don't get that many units to run around snagging objectives and things, and not too much expendable stuff, and particularly so if you have the enormous investment of Guilliman himself on the board too. At 340 points though, Guilliman still seems to be making his way into the vast majority of Ultramarines lists. The Primarch and Lord Commander of the Imperial himself certainly makes it into a very different army. He gets to choose 2 targets for Oath of Moment, and if you destroy the first you get to move on to the second. You get discounted stratagems for a unit within 12 inches of him, and can still pack an enormous punch in melee, with a very good chance that if he is slain he'll just get back up again to have one more turn of carnage. He's certainly an intimidating presence in the heart of the enemy army list though, and the resurrection rule often means it's worth going after other things rather than him. It is pretty nice to see Redemptor Dreadnought solidly more back in the mix for tournament armies, I guess particularly so in Ironstorm, but they're 12 wounds at toughness 10 with a 2+ save and -1 damage, so very hard to take down, and perhaps particularly so for certain damage 2 melee units that tend to be quite popular in 40k. It's not got the most enormous damage threat in the world, but is at least pretty general purpose, the Macroplasma in particular being quite nice at punching up with boosted Oath of Moment. The +1 to wound can make it a big threat against big stuff as well. Otherwise for Ultramarines list, the other really popular character that didn't make it into the last one is Marneus Calgar. He's 200 points alongside his Victrix Honour Guards, and is often found joining company heroes, giving you a sort of 300 point bully unit that can handle the vast majority of things it goes into, and most enemy units aren't going to be wiping them out in a single round of combat. If he's the Warlord he can also generate command points as well, but despite that having a fair bit of value, it doesn't stop him from being fielded when he can't be the Warlord when Guilliman's about. For another couple of recent Ultramarine successful lists, here is one that went undefeated at the London Grand Tournament across 5 games. This one's the flexible and Ultramarines themed Gladius Task Force. There's both Guilliman and Calgar here, Calgar with his company heroes, a nice big squad of Stern Guard with Chief Librarian Tigurius for an interesting damage threat, a Fire Discipline Lieutenant with a massive squad of Hellblasters, some big guns with the Vindicators, and a bunch of Space Marine objective support. Here's another strong Ultramarines list, also from the London Grand Tournament, making the top tables with Innes Wilson's list. This one's a Stormlance task force, so advance and charge plus big reactive moves. This one goes for triple Redemptor Dreadnought, a Storm Raven gunship to deliver one of them that can use the -1 to hit and wound stratagem to keep it safe. A pair of Stormspeeder hammer strikes that can strip cover from things and also use the durability stratagem if they'd like to. And going really quite light on the objective support units for a Space Marine list. That wall of Redemptor Dreadnoughts and Storm Ravens with -1 damage is going to be pretty brutal for any armies with lots of damage too. Moving on though, and talking of the Gladius task force, the examples for the Imperial Fists and Iron Hands are both Gladius lists. This one's more themed around the Ultramarines, though of course any chapter can use this flexible and well balanced army. It's often been a staple both for core codex chapters and plenty of divergent chapters alike. Space Wolves, Dark Angels and Black Templars get a lot out of it. The core rule has the combat doctrines, options to advance and shoot, advance and charge, and fall back, shoot and charge, and you can flex into them for one command point. An ignore cover stratagem and a lance melee stratagem, all of which get better in one doctrine. A 2 command point fights on death is really big for Marine melee, and a few of the enhancements are pretty useful as well. You can make one Marine rather tough with the Artificer armour, and both Fire Discipline and the Honour Vehement are usable. Imperial Fists haven't exactly been the most meta chapter in recent times, but they're certainly not absent from tournament standings, and some people do manage to break through with them. Someone who managed to make the Imperial Fist work well recently was Andrew Porras, who used this list at the Las Vegas Open, going 5 wins to 1 loss. It is using Gladius Task Force as opposed to Anvil Siege Force, which is pretty rare to be seen in competitive play, but does make good use of both of the Imperial Fist characters, Darnath Lysander and Tor Garadon. It seems that Lysander here is leading a squad of Assault Terminators for a pretty all-round durable and dangerous unit. Tor Garadon's going with a squad of Aggressors, giving them ignores cover I suppose, and some big damage against vehicles in melee with his own rules. It looks like Tor Garadon's unit will be delivered via that Land Raider Redeemer to get them into melee. Then there's a Judas here with Artificer armour. He'll be fighting first with a squad of Bladeguard veterans, and it seems that they're going to be delivered into battle with an Impulsor with Shield Dome. Again, there's quite a lot of big guns, as you might expect with the Imperial Fists, a Vindicator and 2 Ballistas Dreadnoughts providing some hard-hitting anti-tank firepower, and then a bunch of skirmish objective units, drop-close Inceptors, blazing away with some Assault Bolters, Intercessors for sticky objectives, Scouts for infiltrate, and the skirmishing Combi Lieutenants. For the Imperial Fist characters, Lysander's a solidly usable unit, and Assault Terminators seem like the best place for him. He makes them all OC2 so they have more weight on objectives, gives them -1 to wound so they're actually legitimately somewhat tough to take out here. He gives them a bit of protection against the special weapons and heavy weapons that would usually be good into them, and also helps out with their damage output as well, with a bunch of strength 10 and damage 3 attacks, and has a personal 2+ invulnerable save if you can trigger it at the right time. He seems pretty effective for his 100 points, though has been a bit hampered by the Terminator squad not really being the most efficient datasheet for Codex Space Marines. If they were more threatening and central units, then he'd be more prominent. Otherwise, Tor Garadon again feels usable but maybe not crazy standout for his points cost. He's basically an anti-armor specialist with his big special rule giving him extra AP, strength and damage against vehicles, monsters and fortifications, and that means his melee with strength 14, AP 4 and damage 4 is just utterly devastating to them if he can get in close, and his AP 3 and damage 4 grav gun is actually going to be more of a threat against vehicles than you might expect at range. He also gives his unit ignores cover, which is no bad thing for the aggressors, but does feel like one of the characters that is a bit matchup dependent. If he's going to be fighting against, say, an army of knights or something, he's absolutely going to have great value, but if he's paired up against elite infantry or other units out there, it's probably not really going to be worth his points as much as other leaders. As we've seen, Bladeguard with a Judas here are a fairly common pick in a fair few of these Space Marine lists. Lots of strength 5 and damage 2 attacks that take buffs well, good with things like lethal hits, the Oath of Moment +1 to wound, and quite enjoying the advance and charge that you can get from Gladius and Stormlance. Gladius in particular does seem to support them rather well, getting the option for lance melee and extra AP there, and reactive moves and fights on death could also both be really quite big for them. Finally, and out of the core codex chapters at the moment, the one that I struggled to find a good example that had done well in a tournament list recently were the Iron Hands. It's probably been them and the White Scars that have had the least representation on the top tables, at least prior to any updates. And while we saw someone manage to win a grand tournament with White Scars relatively quickly, it doesn't look like the same has been true of the Iron Hands just yet. I do wonder if Karnok Var and the double Oath of Moment available in the Hammer of Avernii detachment might be enough to tempt some people into playing them. Though for the meantime, the best performing Iron Hands list that I saw was this one. It looks like this one took second at SM Battle Report's No Retreat event under the command of Chris Lord. If I'd been able to find something either using one of the Iron Hands unique characters or Iron Hands actually using their Ironstorm detachment, that would have been more fun. But this one does feel like it has the general feel of the Iron Hands, going heavy on the vehicles and dreadnoughts, and isn't using any of their characters and is declared as Iron Hands. And of course there's no reason Iron Hands lists need to use their special characters or named attachment, of course. In any case, this one goes heavy on the vehicles, 2 Gladiator Lancers for some punchy anti-tank, 2 Redemptor Dreadnoughts with Macroplasmas, and a big threatening Repulsor Executioner, again with Macroplasma Incinerator. I guess that'll make some quite nice use of boosted Oath of Moment. Then we've got a Captain that seems pretty thematic for the Iron Hands, armed with a Power Fist and maybe the Artificer armor to represent some bionics there. It looks like he's going to be leading a squad of company heroes for sort of medium threat damage units. There's a Judas here leading some Bladeguard for their elite melee and fights first things, a Tech Marine to support some vehicles. 2 units of dropping Inceptors, 1 with Bolters, 1 with Plasma, and for objective support some Intercessors and Jump Intercessors. Probably one of the most interesting and unusual things though is the Phobos Captain. He's really quite a rare choice in Space Marine armies these days. He'd allow you to be able to redeploy the Infiltrators and himself if you want to, and could be a small infiltrating utility unit all by himself, though I guess alternatively could go with the Infiltrators and provide them some free stratagems. I'd guess that going solo would get a bit more use out of him though, as that way he's another utility unit and could plug away with the free stratagems, at least when the company heroes aren't using them. As mentioned, it'll be interesting to see whether any Iron Hands lists wind up using Karnok Var and Hammer of Avernii. Weirdly enough, the Iron Hands got a boosted first company detachment that also allows a bunch of its stratagems to be used on Dreadnoughts. At first impressions, probably the overall detachment doesn't really feel like it offers quite as much as Gladius with its big movement rules, but at the same time doubling down on Oath of Moment is really quite a big deal, particularly when you also get to reroll some wound rolls of 1 against the same target as well. You could have a pretty serious gun battery on the go with that, and could have some interest with Space Marine indirect fire and batteries of whirlwinds as well. I wouldn't expect this to be going particularly mainstream for the Space Marines, but feels like there's enough there at least to be interesting just on the sheer damage front, never mind the stratagems that can help out the veterans and Terminators. That's about it for this one though. Let me know your thoughts as to the army list of the different chapters out there, and what sort of things have been working out well for you in your Space Marine armies. Finally, I'll just cycle back to the video sponsor in the Magnet Baron and talk a bit more about their various neodymium offerings. For some of their more popular items, they've got their magnetising starter bundle, which has some drill bits, a pin vise, applicators, glue and a bunch of magnets to start you off. Can be handy enough as a one-click thing to give you all the things that you need to get going with a few magnets if you're new to this side of the hobby. They sell those applicators separately as well as obviously just about every size and shape of magnet under the sun. They've got most of the ones that you'd want for wargaming, including a few flush fit ones that can fit directly under bases, and they can work quite well for magnetic transport solutions. As mentioned, they've also got their tailored kits as well, ones that are specifically aimed at certain models, some with fancy 3D no drill bits, some that do require some drilling. They do have quite a lot of options available. In any case, check them out, links down in the video description, and a big thank you to them for sponsoring this one. I'll leave that there for now though. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. If you've been enjoying the videos on the channel, Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep these videos coming. Channel patrons get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.